you're so stupid that you're willing to admit this. So next year, when you go 7-10, you don't think this quote's coming back to haunt you? These are the people judging Belichick and telling you he's the third best.
This is the Lombardi Line with former NFL executive Michael Lombardi. Now here is your host, Stormy Buonantony, on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Let me lay out some of the bullet points for our audience who may not have read it just yet, because it is pretty long. Written by Don Vianata, Seth Wickersham, and Jeremy Fowler. Big picture, that Belichick thought he had the job in Atlanta, was blindsided when the team went another direction, announcing Raheem Morris. A source alleged that the Patriots owner, Robert Kraft, called Arthur Blank, the owner in Atlanta, twice on the phone, warning him not to trust Bill, which was a big part of the Falcons passing on him. The Patriots do deny that conversation took place during the vetting of the process, saying Kraft advocated for Bill to get the job. But the spokesman for Kraft, Stacey James, also, when asked if Kraft ever criticized Bill in conversations with Blank, said Kraft has no recollection of that, but may have done so prior to January. So the growing bad blood that we've known for a while, getting some more pub this week. Michael, what did you make overall of the article and what came out?
Well, I mean, obviously, I got a phone call from Seth who asked me a couple questions, which I was on the record, and everything I said was on the record. A lot of people were off the record in the column. But to me, I think there's two factors here in this decision. I think that clearly from the start, Rich McKay, who is the trustee of the Arthur Blank estate, really wanted no one to come into the organization that was going to upset the structure that they had, even though Belichick was and his people were told prior to the conversation of the interview that Rich wasn't going to be involved. But this was truly a Machiavellian opportunity for them to systematically make sure that Arthur Blank, who wanted to hire Bill, was outvoted. And I think as you read through the article, I think it frankly makes Atlanta look a little bit, not a little bit, a lot like, what are they thinking, right? I mean, when they sit there and quoted as saying he wasn't in our top three coaches, when your general manager has won 21 games in the 3 years that he's been there, your assistant general manager presided over the drafting of Justin Fields and Mitchell Trubisky in Chicago and got fired. Like, are you really the ones who should be judging the greatest coach of all time? It's somewhat strange. And then to be boisterous about it, to stick your neck out and say, this is what we thought? Come on now. And Chris Olsen, who's clearly was the guy they're referring to in terms of he didn't want to change their contractual structure to bring more players in to work out in the offseason. I mean, this is just typical what the NFL is. And my phone lit up this morning early, so I knew the column was out. And a lot of people's reaction is that's why Atlanta never wins. I mean, they're behaving and acting and being quoted as if they won 5 Super Bowls, and they're treating a coach who has 8 Super Bowl rings as if he's lost it. Why don't they ask Matt Rule if he's lost it? If you have a phone conversation with the man, you actually think you're smarter than him? And at the end of the day, Stormy, for me, like, really, Fontenot and Pace are going to judge Belichick? I mean, that's how you're going to handle this? Like, that's really should have been in the article. I mean, this was clearly Rich McKay wanted Raheem Morris from the start. Rich McKay's son will eventually come work for the Falcons. This was all done internally, and it was planned. And once they got Blank convinced it wasn't the right thing to do, off to the races they went.
Well, and it's funny, too, when you talk about the Falcons and winning. Who'd they lose their most recent Super Bowl to again? Okay, yeah, let's just make sure that we throw that into the conversation as well, Michael. But you said it. Bill didn't even, according to the article, finish in anyone's top 3 when Blank and his, quote, top lieutenants voted on the team's next coach, ranking each of the candidates. They were even quotes of saying he was essentially voted off of the island. And what I liked about what your perspective was when they put your quotes into it, because again, there were a lot of unnamed sources in this one. So I like that you were putting your name out in front of it. You said where Belichick not getting fair enough evaluation is if you have a good way of doing something, he's one of the best all-time listeners. He's open to change. It just has to be smart change. And Bill repeatedly, according to the article and things that we had heard throughout that hiring process in Atlanta, was talking to Blank about how he was willing to work with Terry Fontenot. He was even willing to work with Rich McKay. He was willing to give up a lot of the personnel and decision-making things and other roles that he had previously held in New England because he just wanted to be a coach.
Yeah, and yet, they think the game has passed them by. I mean, it's really kind of comical. It really is kind of comical. That you think they've won 3 Super Bowls in their 3 years down there in Atlanta with 21 wins. I mean, and everything is Arthur Smith's fault, right? So it's just typical of the NFL. It just shows you that to me, if I'm a fan of the Falcons and I'm reading this article, whether I like Belichick or not, the lack of respect shown to him, and obviously the article goes deep into the Kraft conversation about not trusting him. That's the one that has me completely baffled. Like, I don't know what has occurred within that building for Kraft to have not trusted Bill, which is allegedly he told Arthur Blank. I find that hard to believe when he delivered 6 Super Bowls, when he increases the value of your franchise tremendously. I have a hard time understanding that. But look, this is the NFL. Everybody wants to get credit for success, and they want to tear down the people most responsible for that success. And I think this is just going on. It's almost a Shakespearean play, where everybody becomes a tragic figure within it, and they attack. And I think it's ultimately a wonderful feeling that the former players of the Patriots are the one coming to the defense of Belichick. Like, I was going to be on the record in the column because I have nothing to hide. I watch the man work. I talk to the man. And man knows football more than anybody. I promise you, more than anybody within that organization. They're intimidated by him. He's not outdated. The fact that Terry Fontenot and Ryan Pace are judging him, I find that really hard to believe, but that's the NFL. Mm-hmm. That is why some teams win and some teams don't. That's why Bill Walsh told me in 1984, we're only competing against 8 teams here.
If that warning from Kraft to Arthur Blank was true, between that and everything like with the Dynasty documentary that had come out, and it just feels like the negativity that Kraft has is pretty remarkable and a little bit insane, as you pointed out, Petty. Given the success that they had together.
It's one thing to not want Belichick as the head coach. No problem. You don't want the guy who's won 6 Super Bowls. You've won nothing in your career. You've changed uniforms every 2 years. Rich McKay's been there since 2003. No big deal. You keep going on that course. You're perfect. Everything's great. You don't want him? No problem. But to sit there and say he wasn't in your top 3, to sit there and honestly be quoted as saying behind the scenes that he wasn't the third, at least in the top 3 coaches you considered, is insulting my intelligence, and it shows your stupidity. You're so stupid that you're willing to admit this. So next year, when you go 7-10, you don't think this quote's coming back to haunt you? Like, now you just put more pressure on your team. It really is comical. It's comical, and it's almost revealing to America about the ineptitude of most of these NFL teams. Terry Fontenot's won 21 games in 3 years as a general manager. His number 1 assistant, the great Ryan Pace, drafted Mitchell Trubisky and Justin Fields in Chicago and left a disaster behind. And yet these are the people judging Belichick and telling you he's the 3rd best. Like, I find it hard to believe. You don't want to hire him? No problem. No problem. But then don't insult yourself out the door.
So, Michael, especially like when you look at the Falcons side of this, and for anybody who missed it, there is a massive, long ESPN article that came out today detailing the why, with a number of unnamed sources. Michael is quoted in the article as well. The why behind him not getting the job in Atlanta. There's some ties with Robert Kraft and what he may or may not have said to Arthur Blank throughout the process. But how much of the Falcons side of this, Michael, just reaffirmed to you that guard your desk mentality? Because that was all that I really saw coming through.
Clear. I mean, look, let's be clear. Rich McKay is in charge. He's the guy who's been in Atlanta since he left Tampa. He is Arthur Blank's number 1 human being. He's in charge of Arthur Blank's estate, okay? So he didn't want Belichick coming in. Even though they played the game that he was not going to be involved, he's always involved. He's always involved. And when you have that relationship with the owner and you know you can manipulate the owner, you let things kind of play out. And so ultimately, this is kind of all those quotes in there. Like, if you truly believe what you're saying, put your name behind it. Like, I put my name behind it. I wasn't going off the record with the guy. I mean, I know Seth for a long, long time. We're huge Springsteen fans together. I've talked to him before. Sometimes I disagree with what he writes. But I wasn't going off the record because to me, somebody's got to defend the winningest coach of all time behind Don Shula. They treat him like he's a pedestrian, that he just showed up. I mean, you're telling me that Raheem Morris, that we've forgotten all about his Tampa experience, as a head coach, that was just because he was too young. Okay, great. Well, Rich, who was in Tampa when he was there? Like, this was a setup. Like, don't insult my intelligence. It's almost ridiculous. And that they actually are promoting this. If I were an Atlanta Falcon fan, or if I was doing talk radio in Atlanta, I would be more mad at Atlanta than this because it shows your stupidity.
It's definitely interesting, especially just to hear those words. The exact verbiage in the article was talking about the way that Blank talked about Bill Belichick over Super Bowl week, called him a living legend. But what Blank didn't say was that he and his top lieutenants had voted on the team's next head coach, ranking each candidate, and Belichick didn't even finish in anyone's top 3. He was essentially voted off the island. The greatest coach of all time didn't come close, and that was as close as Belichick would come in 2024. That is, again, from the ESPN article this morning from Seth Wickersham, Don Van Natta, and Jeremy Fowler.
Stormy, can I tie this back into the 76ers again?
Please.
Because there's a quote in there from the great Josh Harris, the owner of the 76ers, who believes that his model in Philadelphia of hiring the GM and letting the coach work is the best model of all. Now, I'm going to look around here, but I haven't seen Philly 76ers win a title since anywhere. I haven't seen them get to a conference championship game since Larry Brown left. Like, You're telling me you know what it is to win sports? That just showed me he has no clue, which is what I've been saying as a Sixer fan. Like the way he built the organization, they got no chance to win there. They won't win. And they're never going to a conference championship. I don't care. The process, Embiid's the greatest, the MVP. Forget about it, all right? Just forget about it. You can put that away. And then he's sitting out there promoting, I like the way I set up my structure. Your structure stinks. You can't win anything. And you're proud of it? Give me a break.